Hello, Transitional Math students. Mrs. Robinson here to work practice benchmark chapter 8 with you. We finally get to solving equations and inequalities, and I did put in some review of basic one-step equations in module 3, I believe, if you need to review that. But we're here to the practice benchmark, so let's go ahead and get working. The sum of an integer and the next greater integer is at most 13. Write an inequality means less than or greater than, or less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. So write an inequality to find the lesser integer, meaning the smaller integer. Then solve for the lesser integer. So here's the thing. We have the sum of an integer and the next greater integer. So first we need to pick a variable for an integer. A lot of times we use n, but you can use x. So let n be the smaller integer. And then the next greater integer, well, the next greater whole number would be n plus 1. That'll be the next integer. Okay. Now the sum of them is at most 13. What does at most mean? Well, if I sum these two together, n plus the next integer, n plus 1, it's at most 13. So that means that these have to be less than or equal to 13. If it is at most, you would think at most would mean greater than. Careful. It's at most 13. That means 13 is the biggest number it could be. So these numbers need to be less than or equal to 13. 13 is going to be greater than or equal to these numbers. So the sum of these numbers. So let's go ahead and set it up. We wrote our inequality, n plus 1 needs to be less than or equal to 13 because it's at most 13 when I sum them together. All right, so think that out before you write your greater than or equal to, because I know a lot of students, when they see at most, they think greater than, but think about what that means. All right. So n plus 1, well, n plus n, let's solve over here. N plus n is 2n plus 1. That's less than or equal to 13. Now we need to solve for n. We need to isolate it by itself. So we start peeling off this part. So peel off the add and subtract first. Subtract 1 from both sides of the inequality. I need to do it to both sides to keep my balance. So I've got 2n is less than or equal to 13 minus 1 is 12. Now n is multiplied by 2, so the opposite of multiply is divide. Now I divided both sides by 2. If I divide both sides by a negative number, I flip this sign, but I did not divide by a negative number, so I keep my sign the same. I'm going to have n is less than or equal to 6. So n is less than or equal to 6. That will be your lesser integer. Your lesser integer needs to be less than or equal to 6. And then here is your inequality. So those are your two solutions for number 1. All right, number 2, we're going to solve and graph the solution to this inequality. So in order to solve this inequality, I first need to collect my z's on one side of the inequality. So I have negative 4z's here and positive z's here. I like to pick on the lesser number. Since it's negative, let's add to both sides and move the z's over to here. So we're going to add 4z to both sides of the inequality. And negative 4z plus 4z, that eliminates. That's the whole point. Bring down the 8, bring down the inequality, bring down negative 27, and then z plus 4z is positive 5z. All right, now we want to isolate the z on one side of the inequality. So we need to get rid of the negative 27. Let's go ahead and add that to both sides of the inequality. And we have 8 plus 27, that's going to be 37, 36, 35. And that will be less than 5 times z, or 5 z's. And now our last step, we want z by itself, so we want to undo the multiplication with division. Divide both sides by 5. And when I do that, I end up with, I'm going to write it down here kind of squishy, z is less than, or actually z is greater than 35 divided by 5 is 7. So 7 is less than z. And there's my solution. Now, when I graph, I like my z to be on this side. Since z is greater than 7, if I flip these around, I could write it like this. Z is greater than 7. This reads 7 is less than z. Z is greater than 7. So if I flip it, I have to flip this inequality. Z is greater than 7. 7 is less than z. All right, so careful when you flip it. It's kind of similar to when I divide by a negative. I have to flip that inequality, okay? So if I flip these sides, I have to flip the inequality also. So let's go ahead and graph this. It's greater than, so I have an open circle. If it was greater than or equal to, I would have a closed dot, okay, including that number. Now, the reason I like to put my variable on this side is it helps me check this sign, okay? And this is what I mean. I'm going to put my dot on 7. I'm going to do an open circle on 7, not a closed dot, because z is greater than 7, not greater than or equal to. It does not include 7. So I open circle on 7, and since z is greater than 7, I'm going to go anything bigger than 7 and make my arrow go this way. And the reason I like my variable to be on this side, because it lets me check my arrow and my inequality should match up. My inequality points this way, and my arrow points this way. And that only works when the variable's on this side. It doesn't work when the variable's over here because these won't match up. So that's why I like my variable to be on that side so I can check it. All right, number 3, the perimeter of the triangle shown is 24 meters. What's the length of the shortest side of the triangle? Well, I have to figure out which is the shortest side. The hypotenuse is not the shortest side. So one of these is the shortest side. I know this is 8. I don't know what x is. I have to figure out what x is to figure out what the shortest side is. So I know these all add up to be 24 meters because it's the perimeter. So I'm going to go ahead and go x plus this side, x plus 4, plus this side, 8, is going to be 24. And I dropped the meters just for now. Now go ahead and solve for x. So x plus x, that's 2 x's. Combine your like terms on one side of the inequality first. So combine our like terms. I have 2 x's, and I'm going to cross those out because I did that. And then 4 plus 8 is 12. So cross that out, I did that. And that equals 24. Now I'd like to isolate the x, so first peel off the plus or minus. I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides. And then I'm going to bring this down. I get 2x. That goes to 0. Bring down the equals. 24 minus 12 is 12. Now divide both sides by 2. And you're going to get x equals 12 divided by 2 is 6. So I know x is 6. So this is 6. And this is 6 plus 4, or 10. So this is 6 meters, 10 meters, 8 meters. So what's the length of the shortest side? 6 meters. All right, on to the next one. Okay, number 4, this sentence. 6 less than the product of 4 and a number is less than 0.5 times the opposite of the number. Okay, so which of these translates to this? Let's break it down. 6 less than the product of 4 and a number, let's stop there. And then it goes is less than. So 6 less than, that means I'm going to subtract off 6. I could start with negative 6, but let's go ahead and do the product of 4 and a number. I want the product of 4 and a number, and then I want 6 less than it. So let's go 4n minus 6. Okay, 4 and a number, the product of it means multiply. So 4 times that number, n, and then subtract off 6. You want 6 less than it. And then you have is. Usually when you see is, you think equals, but this actually says is less than. So this stuff is less than 0.5. So I want all of this to be less than, not just is, which would be equal. I want it to be is less than. So this is all less than 0.5 times the opposite of the number. So it's all less than 0.5 times the opposite of the number. So the opposite of the number would be negative n. And I can go 0.5 times negative n and write this as negative 0.5 n. So I'm going to have 4n minus 6 is less than negative 0.5 times n. So let's see. This looks like it is, but there's an equal sign there. Careful, a lot of people might do 6 minus 4n because they see 6 first, but 6 is less than the product, so you have to do 4n minus 6. And here it is, 4n minus 6 is less than 0.5n, so it's C. All right, on to number 5. Okay guys, number 5, the solution to which equation is graphed at 5 on the number line? Well, what does that mean? They're just saying like, okay, the solution to the equation is graphed at 5 just means the solution is 5. That's all it means. If you had a number line and you had 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it went on forever, of course. And I have a solution right here at 5. That's how I'd graph it. That's all this is saying. Which one of these has a solution of 5? Oh my gosh, so I pretty much need to solve 4 equations here. So I'm going to go 1.8x minus 4.45 equals 4.55. Okay, so solve for x. I'm going to peel this off first. Add 4.45 to both sides. 4.45. And you can use a calculator if you want, or you can just add down. I'm going to calculate this real quick. Okay, so I'm going to get, when I add these together, I'm going to get 9 equals 1.8x. Now I want x by itself. 1.8 is multiplied by x, so I do the opposite operation, which is divide both sides by 1.8. Bring down x equals 9 divided by 1.8 is 5. We lucked out. It's the first equation. Now, if you're not sure if it's any of these, solve a couple more. Okay, if I did number part B, 2.1x plus 6.45 equals negative 0.05. Okay, so to solve for x, I would subtract 6.45 from both sides. Bring down the 2.1x and then negative 0.04, excuse me, I can't say that, negative 0.05 minus 6.45, it's a double negative, so you actually add those and attach the negative sign. And you're going to get negative 10.5. Bring down the equals. This is multiplied by x, so to get rid of it, we divide by 2.1. And then we're going to get x equals 10.5, that's 2.1, sorry. 10.5 divided by 2.1 is going to give you 5, but look, it's a negative 5, so it's not B, and you can do that for C and D. Now another thing, so it is A. Now another thing that you could do to see which one is a solution, plug in 5 here, plug in 5 here, plug in 5 here, and plug in 5 here. See which one is an accurate solution. So if I took that method instead of solving each of these, if I just took that method where I checked to see if it was a solution, I would just do this. 1.8 times 5 minus 4.45. Does that equal 4.55? Well, I do this multiplication out, 1.8, and I multiply that by 5, and I'm going to get 9. 9 minus 4.45 is 4.55. It checks. Do that for each one of these. That's another way you could do it, and you'll find that A is the solution. Okay, on to the next one. Okay, guys, so number 6, I got to solve this guy. So let's go ahead and take it right here. I have 0.5 times 8x minus 12 equals negative 10, and I'm sorry for that ugly 2. Okay. First thing I got to do is get rid of my parentheses, use distributive property. So I'm going to distribute 0.5 times 8x. Well, 0.5 is a half, so half of 8 is 4x. And then 0.5 times negative 12, 0.5 is a half, so that will be negative 6. And that equals negative 10. Now I can work both sides of the equation. I want x by itself. First, peel off this 6. Add 6 to both sides. So I have 4 x's, and that equals negative 10 plus 6. That's going to give me negative 4. Divide both sides by 4. X is going to give me negative 4 divided by positive 4 is going to give me negative 1. You can plug it in here and check and make sure it works to see if it's a solution, and it is. It's B. All right, what's the solution to this equation? Negative 0.65x equals 59.8. Well, it's just a simple multiply problem. You got a negative there, so go negative 0.65. Do the opposite operation, which is divide on both sides. That eliminates. And you get x equals, and use a calculator, 59.8 and divide it by 6.5. Negative 6.5. 59.8 and divide by 6.5. That's going to give you, that's positive, that's a negative, that's going to give you negative 9.2. And we come over here and it looks like A is our solution. Okay, number 8, an artist creates 9 identical ceramic vases. Each vase has some clay and 1.5 pounds of glass. The artist uses a total of 49.5 pounds of clay and glass to make each vase. So how many pounds of clay? When I do word problems like this, I like to do this. I like to take my question and define my variable that way. So how many pounds of clay? Let x equal the number of pounds of clay. Okay, that's what you want to know. Define your variable that way. X is what you want to know. You want to know the number of pounds of clay. So let's do that. 9 identical ceramic vases. So you know you have 9 vases. And you have some clay. You don't know how much clay. And so you have exactly 1.5 pounds of glass. So in those 9 vases, you have to multiply that by the clay and the glass to get your total amount of pounds of glass and clay for all 9. So you're going to take 9 times the number of pounds of clay and 9 times 1.5 pounds of glass. Add that together, and that will be your total pounds for glass and clay. So I put these in parentheses so I know I have to do 9 times both of those things, and I'm going to distribute 9x, 9 times x, and then 9 times 1.5 is 13.5. Okay, so I distributed it, and then that will be 49.5 for your total. Now to figure out what x is, peel off the 13.5 first by subtracting it from both sides. So subtract 13.5 from both sides. When I do that, I get 36. That's a nice even number. So 9x is going to be 36. Now divide both sides by 9, and you're going to get x equals 4. 9 goes into 36 4 times. So you're going to need 4 pounds. X is the pounds of clay, 4 pounds of clay. You can check it. 4 pounds of clay and 1.5 pounds of glass. Well, 4 plus 1.5 is 5.5. Multiply that by 9 because you have 9 vases, and that should be your total pounds of glass and clay. All right, on to the next one. I just realized you can see my ceiling in this video. We had a flood. Okay, so there's a hole in my ceiling. All right, the cost of a tank of gas is 4.18 per gallon. Was at most $58. Okay, so the cost of a tank of gas at 4.18 per gallon was at most $58. Which inequality can be used to find out how many gallons of gas were purchased? So depending on the size of your tank, based on this, you're at most going to pay this, okay? How many gallons were purchased? So the cost of a tank of gas at 4.18 per gallon. So we want 4.18. We don't know how many gallons were purchased. We're going to multiply that times the number of gallons. It's at most $58. So if at most you're going to pay $58 to fill up your tank or to get how much gas you need, all right, I want this amount to be greater than or less than 58. Well, if at most you're going to pay is 58, you want this amount to be less than or equal to 58. So I'm going to take the cost per gallon times the number of gallons I have, and I want that to be less than or equal to $58 because it's at most $58. And that would be D. There you go. Okay, of the following equations, which has the correct solution? So here's the equation, there's a solution. Equation, solution, and so on and so forth. So here's what I have to do, similar to the other one. I could solve each of these equations, or I could take the solution and plug it in to see if it works. Do that. I'm going to go 5 times negative 4 for x and add 7. Does that equal 13? Question mark. We'll check it. 5 times negative 4 is negative 20. Negative 20 plus 7 is going to give me a negative 13. So this is a no. Check the next one. We'll go 20, and then where x is negative 1/4. So I plug in a negative 1/4 for x. And then I subtract 4. Excuse me. I subtract 4, and then I add 10. I don't know what that was. And that should equal negative 1. Well, does it? 20 times negative 1/4, that's like dividing by 4 and then multiplying by negative 1, or dividing by negative 4. So 20 divided by 4 is 5, and then you have a negative. So 5 minus 4 plus 10, well, just do that in order from left to right. Negative 5 minus negative 4 is negative 9. Negative 9 plus 10 is positive 1. That does not equal negative 1. So that's a no. All right, let's go and erase these and give us space for the next 2 problems and see if those work. Careful with your negatives on these, because you could get this wrong just by dropping a negative. Okay, so we want a positive 1/4 in here. We're going to go 12 times positive 1/4 minus 8. Oh, we have another x here. I got to plug it in there also. Minus 5. Does that equal negative 4? Question mark. Let's check. 12 times 1/4 is the same as 12 times 1 divided by 4. So 12 divided by 4 would be 3. And then negative 8 times 1 is negative 8. Divided by 4 would be negative 2. Minus 5. Does that equal negative 4? Well, let's check. 3 minus 2 is 1. 1 minus 5 is negative 4. It does. This one works. Ding, ding, ding. So I'm going to pick C, but check D just to make sure. Plug this in for x. We're going to go 4 over 2 times 1/4 for x. Then minus 4, does that equal 2? Well, let's do it. 4 halves times 1/4, well, the 4's cancel. They cross cancel and become 1 and 1. So I'm left with 1/2 minus 4. That is not going to equal 2. I can already tell, because 1/2 minus 4 is negative 3.5. So that's a no. All right, and then, so we have C. C is your solution. Okay, Maria earned $8 per hour plus a 5% commission on the price of each item she sells. This is common for a sales job, right? You'll earn a small hourly wage, and then you'll get some commissions on things that you sell, okay? She wants to earn 15 hours, or she wants to work 15 hours each week. And she'd like to earn at least 200. Okay, which inequality and solution, so you got to find the inequality and the solution, shows the total weekly sales she must make to reach her goal. So we need to define the variable. What's the total weekly sales? That's the question. What's the total weekly sales she must make? So define your variable that way. They use S's. I was going to use an X, but let's use S to be the total weekly sales. Okay, define your variable by the question. What question are you trying to solve? What do you need to answer? So let's set it up like that. She earns $8 per hour. So we need to do $8 times the number of hours she wants to work. How many hours is she going to work? 15. So we're going to go 8 times 15, right? That's your $8 per hour. And they told us 15 hours. Plus, you're going to get a 5% commission on the price of each item you sell. 5% change to a decimal, you move the decimal over 2 places. So that's going to be 0.05 times the total weekly sales. So I'm going to multiply that by S. I don't know how much she sells. But that, her hourly wage plus her sales, she wants to earn at least $200. So that all needs to be greater than or equal to 200. If she wants to earn at least 200, it needs to be greater than or equal to 200. That's kind of confusing because that most was a less than. The at least happens to be a greater than. If you want to think about it, if you want to earn at least $200, that means this has to be bigger than 200 or equal to it. Okay. Think about what that means. So here I have my inequality. Which one of these fits that? Well, it looks like this one, B, will fit that. Now, because it's multiple choice, you can go, all right, I already know my answer is B, but let's solve it and make sure you get 1600, okay? So if I do 8 times 15, I get 120 plus 0.05 times S. That needs to be greater than or equal to 200. Well, I'm going to subtract off my hourly wages that I get, which is 120. And I'm going to get 0.05 S, if I bring this down, that's an S, is greater than or equal to 200 minus 120 is going to be 80. And then to find S, I'm going to divide both sides by 0.05. I am not dividing by a negative, so I do not flip my sign. So I get S is greater than or equal to, if I do 80 divided by 0.05, I'm going to get 1600. So she needs to sell at least 1600 a week to make her $200. All right, on to the next one. It is B. All right, 4 students solve this equation. Okay, let's see. Number 12. 4 students solve this equation, but only one of their solutions checked, which is the correct. So here's what you have to do. You take negative 18, you plug it in for A here and here, and see if these are equal. Take 3, plug it in here and here, see if they're equal, and so on. Take 11, plug it in here and here, and see if they're equal. Take 18, plug it in. Or I could solve this by cross-multiplying. Anytime you have 2 fractions equal to each other, you can solve by cross-multiplying. So I'm going to go 8 times A minus 7 equals 10 times A minus 2. Now careful, a lot of students just go 8 times A and they forget they have to do it times A and negative 7. So distribute. 8 times A is 8A. 8 times negative 7 is negative 56. That equals 10 times A is 10A. 10 times negative 2 is negative 20. Now let's get our A's together. So let's subtract 8A from both sides to gather our A's to one side of the equation. That eliminates, bring down, I'm going to move down here, bring down the negative 56, bring down the equals. 10A's minus 8A's are 2A's. And then I still have negative 20. Now I'd like A's to be isolated, so I peel this off. I'm going to add 20 to both sides. You get 2A's equal negative 56 plus 20, 46, 36, that'll be negative 36. And then divide both sides by 2. That gives me A, and that will equal negative 36 divided by 2. Which would be negative 18. And there's my solution. So it should be A. Now, if you plug this in to both, you should get that these two are equal to each other when you plug in negative 18 for A here and here. These shouldn't work. So A is, and now you can do it both ways. You could have gone ahead and plugged this in each time, or just solve it once and be done, right? Okay, number 13. An annual pass to the zoo costs $43.25 a person. If the park sold $3,762.75 of passes, so that's the amount they sold, that's not the number of passes they sold, which equation can you use to find the number of annual passes that were purchased? Remember, use your question. How many passes were purchased? What's the number? Use that to define your variable. Let P equal the number of passes purchased. Okay, so if you define your variable by the question that you're looking for, that literally helps you figure out what you need to find. So let's do this. We have $43.25 per person to buy a pass. So if there was 2 of you, you would go $43.25 times 2. How many of them are you? How many passes got sold? Well, do $43.25 times the number of passes that were purchased. That should be your, or the total amount for the passes. That will be the total amount that the zoo sold in passes. So in order to find the number of passes sold, you would just divide both sides by 4325. It didn't even ask us for that. It liked us to set up an equation. And this equation will help you find the total number of annual passes purchased. Okay, let's look at number 14. 3 times the quantity h plus 4 equals 4 times the quantity h minus 1. What value of h makes this sentence true? Well, let's set this up. 3 times the quantity, so 3 times this quantity, h plus 4, equals, it doesn't even say is, it says equals, which is even nicer, equals 4 times the quantity, so now I'm going to go 4 times the quantity, h minus 1. So this reads straight up like you write it. 3 times the quantity h plus 4 equals 4 times the quantity h minus 1. Write it straight out. What value of h makes this sentence true? It's telling us solve for h. So I'm going to go distributive property. 3 times h and 3 times 4, that will give me 3h plus 12. That equals 4 times h and 4 times negative 1, which will be 4h minus 4. All right, I've gotten rid of my parentheses. Now let's gather our like terms on each side. So I have h's here and h's here. There's 4 h's and 3 h's, so I'm going to pick on the little guy and get rid of it. Subtract it to the other side. Bring down the 12, bring down the equals. 4 h's minus 3 h's are 1 h's, or 1h. So 1h minus 4. Now I want h by itself, I get rid of this. Add 4 to both sides. And I'm going to end up with h equals 16. That is what makes this sentence true. It's D. Okay, let's look at number 15, our last one. Hold on. Okay, this last one. Taylor attached 24 ribbons to a jacket in 4/5 of an hour. At this rate, how many ribbons could he attach in 1 hour? So 1 hour means you look for the unit rate. How many can you do in 1 hour? So if I think of it like this, ribbons, this is how I like to do these. Ribbons per hour. All right. Sometimes we say a lot of things per hour. Miles per hour. That's common. All right. We want ribbons per hour. We do 24 ribbons in 4/5 of an hour. But I don't want 4/5 of an hour. I want 1 hour. I want my denominator to be 1. And you can do that by taking the numerator and dividing it by the denominator. Or you can think of it like this. To make my denominator be 1, I want it to be 1 hour, I'd multiply by 5/4. If I multiply by its reciprocal, 4/5 times 5/4 is 1, because 5 divided by 5 is 1 and 1. 4 divided by 4 is 1 and 1. So if I multiply the top and bottom by the same thing, it's like multiplying by 1. All right? So I multiply the bottom by 5/4. That becomes 1 on the denominator. And then 24 times 5 over 4. Well, 24 times 5/4. 24 times 5 and then divide by 4, that's 30. So this will be 30 ribbons in 1 hour. So if there's 24 ribbons in 4/5 of an hour, I literally take 24 and divide it by the denominator. That will make this be 1. So if I take 24 and divide it by 4/5, remember division, here's another way to look at it. Division is the same as a reciprocal and multiplication. Do you remember when you divide fractions, you keep the first, keep flip change. You flip the second, and you change the divide to multiply. So this is the same as 24 times 5/4. And we just did that. That is 30. Okay. So to find the unit rate, or 1 unit, you want your denominator to be 1. So there are a couple ways to do it. I could have multiplied the top and bottom by the reciprocal to make this denominator be 1. If I do it to the bottom, I do it to the top. So I multiplied this by 5/4 and got 1. And I multiplied this by 5/4 and got 30. Or I can simply take my numerator and divide it by my denominator, and that is going to make the denominator be 1, because once I do that operation, I'll have one number which I can put over 1. So if I take my numerator and divide it by my denominator, I just keep the first, flip the second, change to multiply, and I get 30, which is the same as 30 over 1. There's my unit rate, 30 ribbons in 1 hour. And that's how you do those problems, guys. Good luck. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a good day.